The Book of Revelation. For so many, it's this mysterious, complex prophecy about a far-off future. But what if it wasn't? What if its opening chapter was actually an urgent, time-sensitive warning meant for the very people who first read it? Today, we're going to dive into a historical interpretation that sees this message as a first-century document written for a community right on the brink of total collapse.
And it all starts right here, with one man, totally isolated. This isn't a story written from some comfortable study or quiet library. No, this is a vision born in a Roman penal colony. John was exiled to the rocky island of Patmos simply because of his faith. You have to imagine this raw, desperate setting, because that's the crucible where this entire world-changing prophecy was forged.
So to really get the message, we first have to understand the moment it was sent. This wasn't just some abstract theological essay. It was a desperate letter sent from a desolate island to a people who were in deep, deep crisis.
Now, the timeline we're looking at here is absolutely crucial. This interpretation places the writing of Revelation before the year 66 AD. And why does that date matter so much? Because 66 AD is when the Great Jewish Revolt against Rome kicked off, a period of just unbelievable chaos, bloodshed, and destruction. That timing changes everything. It frames this vision not as some far-off prediction, but as an immediate life-or-death warning.
And that urgency? Well, it's baked right into the opening lines of the book itself. The text hammers home this sense of impending doom. This isn't about some distant future. According to this view, for the original audience, the clock was already ticking.
Yeah, the text does not pull any punches. You see phrases like must shortly come to pass and for the time is at hand repeated, just to make sure you get it. The argument here is that these aren't just vague spiritual ideas. They are direct, time-sensitive warnings. They're pointing to a series of events that the very people reading this letter were going to experience in their own lifetimes.
So here's the specific historical timeline this all hinges on. The vision is written down sometime before 66 AD. The main events it describes are said to unfold over the next 3.5 years, a time of intense war and tribulation. And it all leads to a massive climax in the year 70 AD, when the Roman legions marched on Jerusalem and utterly destroyed the city and its sacred temple.
And this really shows you the practical point of the whole warning. The very first of 7 blessings in Revelation is given to those who actually listen to and keep this message. From this perspective, that wasn't just a spiritual blessing for the afterlife, it was a literal one, a promise of protection, a kind of roadmap to help them navigate and survive the destruction that was right around the corner.
But hold on, who has the authority to issue a warning that big? A warning that literally affects the fate of a nation? Well, the text immediately establishes the power behind this message by describing Jesus Christ with a series of incredibly potent titles.
First up, Alpha and Omega. For anyone in a Greek-speaking audience, this was unmistakable. Alpha is the very first letter of their alphabet, Omega is the very last. So this title is a declaration of absolute, all-encompassing authority. He is the beginning of creation, the end of history. He contains all of it.
Next, he's called the first begotten of the dead. Now, this means more than just that he was the first person to be resurrected. This title is deeply connected to the ancient Jewish festival of first fruits. That was a symbolic offering that acted as a promise of the greater harvest to come. Christ's resurrection, then, was the ultimate first fruit, the absolute guarantee of resurrection for everyone who believes.
And the timing of it all is just incredibly precise. On Passover, the exact day the sacrificial lambs were offered, Christ was crucified. He lay in the tomb during the Sabbath. And on the very next day, the day of the Feast of First Fruits, he rose from the dead. It's a perfect one-to-one fulfillment of the festival's symbolism.
And because of this incredible victory over death, the message says that believers are lifted to a whole new status, kings and priests. Now this is fascinating because under the old Mosaic law, those two roles were strictly separated. You could be a king or you could be a priest. You could never be both. But in Christ, these roles, royal authority and spiritual holiness, are fused together. And this wasn't just a fancy title, it was spiritual armor, giving them the strength and the insight they would need to get through the coming judgment. And they were going to need that spiritual authority because it prepared them for the most challenging part of the warning. It's a prophecy wrapped up in one of the most debated verses in the entire book. Behold, he cometh with clouds. In their immediate context, what on earth could that mean? Well, the interpretation we're exploring is very specific.
Okay, so this is really the heart of the argument. A lot of people read coming in the clouds and they picture a literal, physical return of Christ sometime in our future. But this historical reading sees it completely differently.
It sees that phrase not as a physical arrival, but as a symbolic way of saying a coming in judgment, a divine reckoning that would be carried out through the very real, very historical, and absolutely devastating power of the Roman army against first-century Israel.
And this interpretation points to a key moment in the Gospels as evidence. When Jesus is on trial for his life, standing before the high priest Caiaphas, the very man who condemned him, he makes this stunning declaration. He tells Caiaphas and the elders that they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds. It was a direct warning delivered right to his accusers' faces.
And this brings the whole argument full circle. The prophecy states that they also which pierced him will see this event. In this reading, that phrase points straight to the generation that orchestrated the crucifixion. Some of those same people, the ones who shouted for his death, would have still been alive to witness the horrifying judgment that fell on their nation, culminating in the complete destruction of their city and their temple in 70 AD.
So, we're left with a really powerful question. If the opening of this book is anchored so firmly in the events of the first century, a warning about a judgment that has already happened, how does that change the way we read all the dragons, the beasts, and the other prophecies that follow? It reframes the entire book, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, its primary message was one of survival and hope for a people who are literally living through the end of their world.